thank you all for attending. It's lovely to have you all here. This is, I think, the 8th monthly call that we've organised. This is for the Power Platform UX, UI and Accessibility User Group, also known as the Allies. And yeah, today's the 11th of February. So we are a Microsoft user group, so we follow the Microsoft Event Code of Conduct, which is essentially just to be inclusive and kind and respectful of other people. Feel free to take a screenshot of that if you'd like to. And also, if you have any issues throughout the event and you'd like to get in touch with anyone, there are some contact details there. But of course, you can contact myself, Kat, or Anna, and we'll be happy to help you with whatever issues you have. So as I say, we want to be welcoming, respectful, considerate, and inclusive. We're also very happy to have different viewpoints, but please just consider other people's feelings when you're raising your viewpoints, and it's fine to have differences of opinion. Just think about the way that you present that. Everyone's very welcome to use the chat feature or to raise your hand, and then we can get people involved in discussions as well. But we'll let the presenters finish their presentations first. So feel free to use the chat, or I think we have questions as well that you can use. And also, we want to know if there's anything else you'd like us to present on these topics, on these monthly calls. Just tell us. So whether you want us to cover more of a particular elements of Power Platform, or whether it's a particular type of accessibility UI or UX feature. So just some housekeeping, we're recording the call. So if you do have your cameras on, you will be recorded. It's going to be uploaded to YouTube at some point. Feel free to ask questions, and you can, of course, turn on your camera, and at some point we'll allow microphones to be turned on, and we can have conversations about what we've been viewing from the amazing presenters today. And please use the meeting reactions, because that helps the presenters to know what you're feeling about what's going on the screen at the time. We have a call for speakers, of course, because we want new speakers all the time. If you've got something that you've been working on or something that you've been thinking about that you think could be interesting for the audience, please feel free to go to that website address or scan the QR code, or I can send you it later if you want it. And we'd love new speakers, we'd love experienced speakers, anything to do with user interface design, user accessibility, user experience design and accessibility, any of those topics within Power Platform, even if it's leveraging other tools, as long as it's related to Power Platform. So with that said, we've got the more slightly boring bits out of the way. We'll move on to the really fun stuff. So we've got Heather doing her presentation first, which is about inclusive and accessible Power Platform solutions. And then we've got JP second, talking about artfully designed Power Apps. 2 really cool presentations that I'm looking forward to. So without further ado, I will pass us over to Heather to begin her presentation.
Thank you so much, Charles, and welcome everybody. I'm going to do a quick screen share. And so, yeah, let me introduce myself. I see some familiar faces here. My name is Heather Perriam. I am a business applications practice lead for a company called Trustmark here in the UK. I am not originally from the UK, if you didn't guess that. I moved here from America, where I started my Power Platform career, and I've been excited to continue it here. Accessibility is probably my favorite topic, and as somebody who is has a disability, has a mobility issue, as well as ADHD, I'm very passionate about making sure that apps are accessible and inclusive to everybody. The presentation today is only about 15 minutes, so I'm just going over the basics, but I promise you, if you have any questions, comments, anything else you would like to know about building accessible apps, feel free to reach out to me. I'll get my contact info at the end of the presentation. So, without further ado, I want to talk about why accessibility matters, and I've got some points on the slide here. We've got over 1 billion people worldwide that experience some form of disability. That's roughly 15% of the global population. If you're in a room with 100 people, 15 of them probably have some type of disability. But many of our digital solutions are still not designed with accessibility in mind, and that creates significant barriers for users, right? So the importance of accessibility, it's not just about compliance. So we can go through, and I'll talk about some of those tools today that say, yeah, this is compliant, or technically it's accessible, but it's also about being inclusive, right? So if we make our Power Apps accessible and inclusive, we ensure that everyone, regardless of their ability, can use and benefit from our solutions. This includes people with visual, auditory, motor, and cognitive impairments. There's a business and ethical perspective to this too, right? So accessibility, it ensures a better user experience for everyone, not just people with disabilities. That will give you increased engagement, productivity, and usability across diverse user groups. And companies that prioritize accessibility demonstrate social responsibility and inclusivity. There's legal and ethical frameworks. So there's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is WCAG, WCAG. I hear people call it different things. There's the ADA, which is the Americans with Disability Act, and the UK Equality Act that enforce accessibility standards, and obviously many others worldwide. Microsoft has a commitment to accessibility. It's leading the way in accessible technology. So Power Apps include built-in accessibility features such as screen reader support for users who rely on that assistive technology, keyboard navigation for users that can't use a mouse, right? And then contrast and color tools so that you can improve that visual clarity. And then accessibility checkers and app checkers within the Power Platform space that help you identify potential issues within the apps. So when I go through and I'm designing an app, in addition to looking at the accessibility standards that have been lined out or the tools that are built in, I also like to just think about that real world impact. So sometimes I think about users with low vision who rely on high contrast or screen readers in order to be able to navigate through the solution. Maybe somebody with limited motor skills who navigates only using a keyboard or voice commands, right? Which is really fascinating. And then always keeping in mind that if we build it accessible, it doesn't just help users with disabilities, it actually benefits everyone, including aging populations and users in different environments. So by making accessibility a priority in our Power App, it's not just about meeting guidelines, right? It's about empowering every user we have. So by designing with accessibility in mind, we create solutions that are inclusive, equitable, and effective for everyone. So building accessible apps. So we talk about using meaningful labels and headings for clear navigation, right? And so when we're going through, we want somebody to know exactly what they're supposed to be doing at that part of the app. Labels and headings, they provide the structure and the guidance to users, and especially when they're using screen readers and navigating that way. Every control, whether it's a button, an input, drop down, they should have clear descriptive labels so that everybody knows what it does. An example is if you have a button on a form, instead of saying like click here, you can use submit form or save changes. And now everybody understands exactly what action will happen when that button is pressed. Proper tab order and keyboard navigation. I think the first time I used an app checker and it said like my tab control wasn't there.
Are there any questions from anyone? We can include them on chat in the meantime.
Hi, Brian.
I was going to ask a question. It might be more relevant for Heather to answer, so it's a shame that she dropped off, but I'll just kind of open it up and see if anyone else has got any thoughts. Heather was talking about around kind of accessible design, always using labels on buttons. Now, in the modern button control that Microsoft have released, you've got the option to use it with icon only, and I've seen this used for things like a home button or an edit icon with a pencil. Is that generally considered bad design from an accessible point of view because there's no label there?
It's a good question. I don't know whether I'll call it bad design, ideally you would always have a label with it. But of course, there are moments where you can't fit a label into the space that you have available. And if you're in that kind of situation, you really want it to be very obvious as to what the icon's going to do. So something like a house signifying home, I think the majority of people using mobile phones would understand that that's what that means. As long as you're not going too far outside the bounds of what someone would intuitively think it is, I think it's okay. But it is, it's a tricky one.
Okay, thank you.
Heather's joining, I think.
Yes, she's
I
back.
There we
I'm
go.
back. I'm so sorry. I don't know. I was wired connection and everything, but that was just to make sure everybody's paying attention.
That's okay.
So,
We just
Welcome
talked a
back.
bit about accessibility while you're off.
awesome. Anything interesting?
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a question.
Do you want to ask that again,
Yes.
Brian?
Yeah, so I just asked a question around what you were talking about around always using labels for
Yeah.
good design from an accessibility point of view. Now, with Microsoft's modern button control, you have the option to make it icon only. I've seen this used for things like a home icon or a pencil as an edit icon. Is that generally considered not great design from an accessibility point of view because there's no label there?
It's interesting. And maybe this was, I don't have a share option, Charles. I don't know why it's not
okay.
letting me share. I was about to, we're going to just Heatherize this a little bit since you brought that up, because I was going to show today an example of an app that I spun up. Let's see if this will come. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, so apparently my wire connection is going to be bad, which means I'm going to share from my desktop. So we are going to wing this, just to let you know. But let me go back and share that again. In just one moment. Thank you, everybody, for being patient. I guess we should all know that we can have tech issues, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at, this is an app that I built earlier using Copilot, which is one of my favorite accessibility tools, right? Because I can just tell Copilot things and it gives me a good starting point. And I said, hey, Copilot, I want to build an app that stores accessibility information for my employees. And then I went in and it was like, oh my gosh, this goes against all of the accessibility design principles, because we don't have on this application buttons that explain what everything does. We're using icons, right? And so now somebody has to know, like, oh, if I click the pencil, an action is going to happen, or if I click the delete button and the trash can, maybe it'll delete something. But that is against design principles. So Brian, to your point, I think that's a really good example. Is sometimes even if we're doing something that we think, okay, this will definitely make sure it's accessible and definitely make sure that I'm within those guidelines. We have to double check ourselves, because it might not necessarily pick up. I didn't touch this app, right? It didn't add anything to it. I just said, hey, and anybody who's built from Copilot before knows this is exactly what happens, right? It gave me 3 screens when I would probably build it into one, all of that kind of stuff, right? But then one of the tools that's built into Power Apps that we can use to check our accessibility is our app checker. And do you see how it comes up with 31 accessibility errors right off the bat? And so this comes into all of these things that are missing accessible labels. What does that mean? That means if I'm using a screen reader and I go over something, my screen reader isn't able to tell me what it is or what its function is or what it does. And if I'm visually impaired, I might not be able to figure it out, right? And that makes the app less accessible to me. We can find that accessibility label when we go into the properties of the components. And this is really hard to do on one screen. Oh my gosh, I'm spoiled by 2 monitors, you guys. But and we're able to look at it there and add that accessibility label at that time. The other thing, though, that it comes up with is the bit that I talked about, I think, before I got disconnected, which was the tab stop. So these components, these items that are listed out, don't actually have anything built into it to tell the screen reader where to go next and how to navigate through the app, which can be a problem, right, when you're going through it. So I think that was a really good discussion. or question, statement, whatever we want to call it. Really quickly, I'm just going to switch because I'm conscious of time and kind of go back through the rest of what I was going to share, just so I can make sure that we cover it. Just give me just 1 second. So you do want to avoid complex UI elements when you're going through that, right? So if you start putting in, and I know some of you should feel really guilty when I'm about to say this, and I do because I've done it, but like a hidden text label, for example, right? I call it like my dev mode, and maybe I have a text label in there and then I'm hiding it. That can actually cause a problem when people are using screen readers. They still might pick that up. So just keeping that in mind, that everything we do in our final production version, we need to think about how that's accessible to other people. Color and contrast. I'll give you guys some resources at the end of this where you can, different tools that you can use to check that. If you use the Power Apps themes, those should be compliant as far as contrast goes and be accessibility. If you're going to design your own theme, you definitely want to run it through a checker and make sure that that color contrast has the ratio that it's needed in order to be accessible by people. The other bit in here, which I find really interesting, is avoid relying solely on color to convey your meaning. So when I was in school, the teacher would go through and like red pen everything that was wrong. So then I grew up associating the color red with something bad, like a lot of us do. Well, what happens if I can't see the color red? Then I have no indication that there's something else going on. So that's where using icons, pop-up, stuff like that, other visual indicators or other indicators beyond just the color change to say, like, there's an issue here. And also the screen reader will be able to pick that up. If you have a pop-up element and we put the focus on, then the screen reader is going to say, hey, this focused item just came up and said, like, there's an issue with it. Test it. Do that Power Apps app checker. I think that's a really good benefit. Don't sigh when you get 500 accessibility errors. Just go in and fix them so you can make sure that everybody can access their app. Test it with screen readers. I'm going to link you at the end to the NVDA screen reader. That's free. It's a free open source that you can download, and you can use a screen reader to test your application's accessibility. And then just do some manual testing. Try getting around with the keyboard and seeing, are you going to the right place? And the biggest piece that has been so useful to me is using user feedback. And so I always ask people with the applications, especially people who are really willing to give me that feedback, who might have an impairment that says, hey, Heather, I can't actually read that. I know you think it looks good, but I can't see it, or it makes the content less consumable for me. So our key takeaways, aside from thank you for your patience with Heather's technology, is build apps with accessibility in mind from the start. So it's so much easier as we put these components together if we're doing it as we go. And then you don't end up with 260 accessibility errors at the end, right? Use your structured layouts, use accessible controls, and make sure that color contrast is there. And then make sure you regularly test what you're doing. Some resources that I'll share with you in the chat. We have, as I mentioned, the downloadable screen reader that you can use to put on your screen and see how your app's responding to that. I've got the web content accessibility guidelines, got the web AIM contrast checker, which is a really good tool just to see if your contrast is there. And then I have some additional information on the ADA's guidance on web accessibility, as well as the UK government's accessibility regulations. Thank you so much. I'm not going to keep you from the exciting part where we're going to build beautiful apps. But again, apologize for the technical difficulties. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a message. And thank you so much for your time. I don't know if there's any questions right now I can answer, but I appreciate you all.
Thanks, Heather. That was fantastic. You fit so much information into such a short time there. It's so good,
it's a
though.
lot, isn't it?
Great info. Yeah, I think pretty much everyone who's built Power Apps has had this moment, at least in the early days, when you build an app and then you go to the app checker and you're like, what? How are there 300 accessible labels I haven't filled in? And then you have to go through and fill them all in if you want your app to be accessible. So yeah, that one about doing it from the start is really important. Yeah, if there are no questions, then we can just jump straight over to JP. But if anyone has questions about Heather's talk, oh, we've got Brian. Then, yeah, of course, you can ask them at the end as well. Brian, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a question about the tooltip. How is that viewed in terms of accessibility? I've heard kind of conflicting views on that. Some people say it's good for accessibility, some people say it's bad for accessibility to make use of tooltips.
I think that's a good question, and I think it goes back to gathering that feedback from your users. So I have a friend of mine who he lost his vision in his 30s. So he's really interesting to talk to when it comes to accessibility, because he went from fully accessible to like, I can't access anything. And because I was getting feedback, I would do like alt text and stuff on my pictures, or the tool tips, Brian, like you mentioned. And I'm really descriptive and I'm afraid of leaving something out, right? So I was like writing all this, and then I'd get yelled at by something that said, oh no, your caption should only be like X number of letters or whatever, and I was like, okay, so maybe I'm doing this all wrong. His feedback to me was that he actually, like, the more you describe something for me, the more I'm able to understand what it is. And so if you try to like brief it up, then I might not get the full essence of what you're doing. But if you've talked to one vision impaired person, that's all you've talked to, right? So other people may have different opinions. And I think it is important to check in with your audience. But I can just say anecdotally, that was the feedback that I got in that. And it also highlighted for me, like, just because something like a tool might tell me one thing, it's really important to listen to your users and your community so that you can understand what makes it accessible for them. Great question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Heather. JP, are you ready?
Yep.
Fantastic. Take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, let me share my screen.
Great.
Okay, so first up, I'm JP Espeña from the Philippines. So I'll be discussing about crafting solutions with artfully designed Power Apps. So first of all, I would like to thank our host, Charles, Anna, and Kat. So thank you for inviting me and Heather for today's talk. And I would also like to thank Heather for that wonderful discussion. So yeah, personally, before I started joining these calls, I never really, I don't really know anything about accessibility besides like color contrast. So yeah, there's still so much to learn. So thank you, Heather, for that discussion. And also thanks everyone for joining us today, or probably this evening if you're on the same side of the world as me. So yeah, a little something about me is that I'm a mechanical engineer by profession. So probably like most of you, I have zero education background on coding or software development. So my career started in a cement manufacturing plant where I worked as an engineer. And then around since like 2016, so around late 2022, I discovered that we have access for Power Apps. And yeah, I've been very fascinated by software development, but I have never been able to like learn more about it because of time and like resources. So thankfully, we have this platform where we can build our own app in a low code environment. So yeah, I built my first app in late 2022, which is a digital inspection app that we use in our plant. So basically, it looks something like this. So yeah, from time to time, I keep looking at this to compare how I do things before when I know very little about Power Apps. So yeah, thankful for all the MVPs that shared knowledge and skills for Power App development. So yeah, at that time I started thinking about pursuing a career in Power Platform development. So to further my knowledge on Power Platform development, I joined the cohort one of Power App program by Microsoft in early 2023. And before graduating that, I fortunately landed a role in Power Platform development in a Australian company in May 2023. So after a year, I started posting some contents in LinkedIn, which probably some of you might have seen. So highlighting those contents, for example, is this Gantt chart using out of the box components from Power Apps, and this Kanban board using the drag and drop PCF by Scott. So yeah, as you can see, I this design was inspired by the Microsoft uh, like contents that they shared. So with the gradient background and all the 3D floating objects. So I was really inspired by that imagery. So I incorporate that in this design. And most recently, I created this responsive template where it has responsive components such as this dashboard and also responsive and adjustable side navigation. So yeah, while these contents or side projects that I shared on LinkedIn are very, I would say, colorful. Most of my like work or professional projects are very clean and minimal in design. So, but I still consider that even though this minimal, it doesn't have to be boring. So I incorporate like colors and uh, iconography so that it can be as visually pleasing as those colorful projects that I did. So, for example, in this one, I have a project management app that I use colors for to show or to describe like the status of the projects, and at the same time, those colors incorporated on the status and the donut charts here on the top. And for this timesheet management app, I use colors as well and some icons to like indicate what type of entries are these, like if it's time, fuel, or expenses and leave, which corresponds to the color that is shown on this calendar view. And for this one, it's an HR management app. I use some pictures for like a banner that usually very similar to what we have on some of the social media platform that we have, like LinkedIn. So yeah, those imagery I think can impact like the visual aspect of the app. But yeah, building good design is not just it's not all about the visual. It's like the overall user experience. So to achieve like a good design our app, there are key principles that you can follow. So first one is the consistency and branding. So it's all about the colors, fonts, and layout consistency. So to give you some examples, so for this one, uh, this is the project management app. So uh, having like uniform design all throughout the app will give consistency. So as you can see, like the colors uh, and all the fonts and the layout are consistent across the app. So it helps the user to become familiar with the app easily with very minimal to no guidance. So that's for consistency and navigation and accessibility. So accessibility was already discussed earlier by Heather. So for navigation, one of the key component that we can use is the navigation bar. So it helps the user to navigate across features easily whenever wherever they are across the app. So you can also incorporate something like a breadcrumbs that helps the user to identify their path or where have they been across the app. So uh, the function is that making these breadcrumbs uh, clickable. So when you click on the employees, you will be navigated back to that source or that page. So also you can incorporate in your app a tab component so that user can navigate across modules in the same page. So for instance, I am here in the profile page, so I can navigate in between across these different modules with the help of this tab component. So that's for navigation. And for data presentation, the most commonly used data presentation in Power Apps is the galleries, but we can also add like charts and data cards that can help the user read the data on the Power App. So for example, for this one, we have the cards that shows how many hours or total expenses are uh, plotted by the user in this month or in this fortnight. So it helps the user easily identify at a glance those data, as well as making the gallery more flexible and features that you can present the data by filtering and sorting out those data in the gallery. So next one is performance optimization. So good design is nothing if your performance of the app is bad. So we've experienced that one in this timesheet management app where we have to use like nested galleries. So I know that nested galleries is not always advisable, but with our like the data model that we have no choice but to use nested galleries. So what we did is manipulate the data and utilize and optimize the collection function to like sort the issue on the data source, and as well as instead of having all the components for these tabs in one screen, we separated them in different screens, but retain the tab functionality, so the user will still have the perception that he or she is on the same screen of the approval. So that is something that you can implement as well, because I think Power Apps has as a guidelines or a limit of like 300 components in one screen. So after that number, performance might be affected. So that is something to keep in mind. And lastly is mobile responsiveness. So beside making the layout of your app mobile responsive, you also have to consider like the components of how it will be presented in a mobile device or mobile screen. So for example, this calendar makes sense on a desktop view, since you have like uh, big space to display this calendar and the data inside those dates. So, but in a small screen size like mobiles, uh, you can implement on changing this into a list or a card view where you display all the data and just display the necessary details that has on those dates. So yeah, basically just keeping in mind that not all components make sense when displayed in a mobile screen size. So to further demo these key principles, we are going to have a little quick demo to redesign this management app for invoices. So basically, I created earlier an invoice app, same as header earlier. I used like Copilot, and then this template of app was built. So I just added like those icons to serve as like navigation, the ones that we usually have on a typical Power Apps design. So here we also have like the gallery and all the buttons to manipulate or edit and update the data as well. And this one, so if you earlier we were discussing about like putting labels on buttons. So this one might be confusing to some user because this can mean like lagging out or export. So yeah, those kind of things that we can say that we can improve on this app. So we will try to do that on the demo. So yeah, basically I start my process on creating the wireframe in Figma. So this way I can visualize like how I want the app to look like. So for the navigation, I want to have like a proper side navigation bar here. And then I wanted to have like a proper header here where I can put the user icon and also some buttons that might be useful, like refresh button or the menu button if the side navigation collapse, as well as like the header or the title page or the title of the screen. And at the same time, I want to put the basic function of the screen on top so it can be easily seen by the user. So I want the primary action here on this side and the secondary action on this side. And besides putting the gallery on this main content, I also want to create like some visual cards or data graphs or data representation to add more of the visual on the app. So yeah, let's start by creating this app. So I already created like the components. So with the interest of time, we will just like I will just make them visible so we can visualize that we are building the app bit by bit. So usually I started with building the components, the reusable component, such as this side navigation bar. So here it was built using mostly containers, and then inside those containers are the components. So first off, this collapsible button on top. So it controls the width of the side navigation bar. So the user has the freedom to adjust the width based on the size of the screen, as well as the main content of the side navigation bar. So here I have the container for the logo of the company or even the app logo. You can put it here, and as well as the side navigation menu. So it is built using a gallery with components such as buttons and image to display the icon. So I forgot to mention, but yeah, to have a consistent colors and branding across the app, I defined the colors in this name formula section, as well as the SVG codes for the icon. So yeah, you can see it here. Like I defined all the color values and the icons here on the name formula, so that I can just easily reuse those code to display those icon and use them as the colors across the app. So yeah, basically for the side navigation menu, I use that image to identify the icons for the side navigation menu. And then I also have here a second side navigation menu. Uh, I built this one because on mobile screen, usually side navigation are hidden. So when you click on the button or the usually burger button, the side navigation will pop up. So it's different from the normal side navigation like this one because I added a rectangle shape here that when click, it will collapse or it will hide again this side navigation. So later I will show how it works. So another basic components or the usual components is the header. So here I have like the icon for the user and as well as the uh, icon for or the icon for the menu bar, which has the function to set the show navigation bar to true. So it will show like the navigation bar in mobile device screen size. So yeah. So basically, one thing to consider when you want to make your app responsive is make them fit or place them in containers. So if you want to create like a good responsive app, I think knowledge in using containers is very important. So yeah. So as you can see here, I built this screen with a lots of containers. So yeah, besides putting like the components, there are always inside the container, whether it's a flexible normal container or the horizontal or vertical container. So yeah, first one to show is this side navigation bar. So yeah, I'll just make it visible. So for the visibility of the side navigation bar, I make it this side navigation bar will be hidden once the screen size will be less than 2. So meaning it will be hidden if the screen size or the screen will be on the size of a mobile device. So if we like show some example, as you can see, the side navigation bar is hidden based on that function. So after putting the side navigation bar, I first off I added like this horizontal container so that I can fit the side navigation bar and the main content here. So that every time that navigation bar is hidden, the main content will occupy the space of the side navigation bar, since using horizontal containers will make them auto layout. So yeah, it will always occupies the space. So let's just show this main content and then show the header. So I place the header here on top. So I use like this container because I use this type of container whenever I have components that overlap each other. So if the components are not arranged vertically or horizontally, I use the normal container type. So next we will show this main content. And yeah, this one, for this, I already have the side navigation bar and the header components shown. And then next one, we will show the header. So yeah, let me just make this one quick. Yeah, so here we have the header. So I also put them inside a container so we can like lay out them in a proper way. So using containers, it makes everything easy because you don't have to worry about the alignment of the components inside those containers. So I always use containers like this. So I also added here the export button. So finally, we have the knowledge that this button means export, because yeah, that's the function of that one. And then I will make another button for the main function of this screen, which is to add new invoice. So I use this type of layout of button, so user will know that this is the primary function of the app or of the screen. Next one is we will build the cards that represents like the data of the app. So let me just make this first visible. So the first one will be the total income. So I want to have like a data card here that shows the total income from the invoices. So here I will put this one. So I have here like a vertical container that has these components such as image and labels that shows the total income or the total amount of those invoices. I also want to add like a little graph here that shows the trend of those income. So I added this image. Let me just turn it on. Yeah, so I use quick charts here. So to add this graph or a trend like image here. So if you check on the image value of this one, you can see like the code of that image using quick chart. So yeah, second, I want to have like a card that shows the number of items or number of invoices by status. So let me just turn that on. So I have here like the uh, donut chart that shows the number of items or the how many invoices are there based on the status. So unlike using or BI or some other PCF, where you can interact with the app, with the chart, using quick charts, we will not be able to do that because you use like an image component to display those chart in here. So what I did was I did some trick where I used this legend as a button, where I also added some buttons and also some indicators to like show which status it is. So let me just zoom it in. So yeah, as you can see in this gallery, I added buttons, and when you click on that button, it gives a value to a local variable, which is the status. So when this button is clicked, uh, the chart will also be changed based on that selected status. So I manipulated this SVG chart or the quick chart to like switch based on that selected local status or local variable status. So if the open is selected, and then this is the color that will be shown on that chart. So basically, you can like interact with the chart based on that selected status on this side. So when you click on again, it will go back to the total. So yeah, that's one thing you can do. So you can make your chart interactive when you use Quick Chart for visualizations on your app. And last one, I wanted to add like a graph where it shows like the how many or how many amounts per by payment method. So it's just the same quick chart using image control and then just input like the quick chart code, SVG code here. So yeah, basically now we have like the data visualization for the invoice list that we have. So next, we want to show like a gallery that displays the full data of those invoices. So here I also have like a vertical container as well. And then these vertical containers will house all the components that we can use to control or to show and display the gallery for the invoice. So first off, we have the search and the filter. So I arrange them in horizontal container as well, so they will always have like proper arrangement and alignment. And the next one, I have here this header or the section for the header, which is arranged horizontally as well. And then what you can do with the header, instead of just using like normal labels to serve as the title or the header of the columns, you can use a button to make those headers function as the sorting for the gallery as well. So let me just show an example. So let me just show this gallery. So as you can see here, yeah, I use this header as I use a button for this header so that I can sort this view using this button. So whenever I click this one, it will sort out this gallery. And also I use the same sorting technique on this date title or date header to sort this gallery by the date. So as you can see, when I sorted this one, it automatically turns off the sorting by the invoice ID. So yeah, basically making the header dual in function by making it as the ability of sorting the gallery. So for the last part on this gallery, I also added like a pagination implementation. So basically, since I created this screen as scrollable, it is not good to make the gallery scrollable as well because it confuses like the scrolling of the user. So the best way to display this list or gallery is to make it implement some pagination in here. So basically, there are lots of resources you can find online that teaches how to make the gallery with paginations. But I usually use a hidden gallery that is connected directly to the source, which is the invoice list. And then this is where also the filters and the sorting applies. And then this visible gallery is calls the data from that hidden and then just applies the pagination size and pagination number as well. So yeah, basically that's the function of that hidden and visible gallery. So when you click on these buttons to view the next one, you can browse across the pages or the list of the items. And also I have here like the rows per page. So you can control how many rows you can view in one page. So you can set it to 10 and it will display the 10 items. So yeah. And lastly, one thing to consider that because sometimes it can be easily forgotten when you do some searching and nothing is found. Basically, sometimes the gallery just collapse or it won't show anything. So, best way is to add like a note or an indicator that no data is found when that search is done. So yeah. So basically, we are done with transforming this invoice app into this, I would say, more visually pleasing design. And if you want to make it more colorful, you can by adding background here. So like some of my content, I use like a gradient background, such as this one or this one. So you can add those background to make it more colorful. So as you can see, our header and our side navigation bar is already ready for that background because I already put like an HTML background on this one. So this HTML code, if you ask me to build this one from scratch, I can't do that. So I just found this from the internet and then just change some of the properties that I could understand so that I can come up with something like this where it gives off some kind of glass effect on the items behind it, as well as same thing as on the header where when things or components passes below it, it gives off that glass effect. So yeah, basically you just need to adjust like the this containers for this one because I also use HTML as a shadow for this one because there's a default or a given shadow for containers in Power Apps, but I don't normally use them because it's less customizable than using an HTML to show a shadow or give shadow for the container. So basically, I have this group of shadows here that calls or give shadows for each containers that I have in this main component. So basically, you just need to transform them instead of shadow. Just need to change them into this same HTML glass effect and then just adjust because the sizing I put here some offset so that it can contain or show as a shadow of the container. So when you do that, when you after adjusting those HTML and then giving the same glass effect as this one, you can end up with something like this. So Yep. I just adjust like those HTML into some kind of background so you can easily see those contents in this colorful background. So yep. Basically that's it. So we were able to redesign this simple template from Power Apps into this new redesigned invoice management app, as well as this one with a much more colorful visuals or graphics. So yeah, thanks guys.
Thanks, JP. That was incredible. You've inspired me. And now I'm thinking, how can Microsoft get your brain inside of their Copilot so that you can design the apps instead of what they've got? Because it's so much better.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. No, it was brilliant.
Lots of love and positive reaction from everyone. Absolutely amazing.
So do we have any questions for JP or for Heather? And yeah, I could see that you put so much thought into the design. Like every element, you put so much thought into it. One thing I was going to ask you actually is, with your drop downs where you've got the label kind of on top of the drop down, how do you do that?
Basically, they are inside a container as well. So since they are overlapping each other, I put them inside a container so that I can place this container wherever I want in the app. So it's, yeah. I don't know if I can show that, but yeah, basically it's just putting them inside a container and then adding like a background on the text. So you put a white background so that it looks like it overlaps the line of or the border of the drop down or the text input. So, yeah.
It's clever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you don't have to take up as much space, but you still get your drop down and your label.
Yep. And also the label of the field is always visible to the user.
Yeah, that's true. Cool, thank you.
Any more questions?
Christoph said, great demo. Couldn't make it from the beginning. JP, have you fixed the horizontal mobile view?
Christoph. Not yet. So I haven't got time for that one. So yeah. Thanks, Christoph, for reminding me.
Yeah, of course he's going to remind you. All right, so I will just wrap up.
Any more questions?
I think everyone's off building apps now because they've seen how cool they can look.
I can see that Paulo joined us. I hope he's going to be the next one to present. I think he just dropped as soon as I said his name.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
It would be great to get Tola in, yeah.
No, absolutely. Like, as soon as I said his name, he just dropped off.
He knew it was coming.
Totally.
All right, so on to next month's call. So we've got two more amazing presenters. We're really lucky. We've got Stuart Baxter. He's going to be talking about GDS, and he's got a musical version of it. So GDS is the government design system, and it's an accessible standard that helps to create very simple and easy to use websites. And it's a really cool standard, and it's something that we can be quite proud of from the UK. And then Taylor Dorwood is going to be talking about accessibility. He's a bit of an accessibility maestro. He has lots of certifications about accessibility. And I'm really curious to see what he says about things, because he's bringing accessibility from outside of Power Platform into Power Platform as well. So that will be, of course, on the 11th, because we're on the 11th of every month. So yeah, the 11th of March at the same time as today's. And there's a QR code, of course, if you want to get to that call. I can also share the link. And yeah, just wanted to say thank you so much to Heather and to JP for the lovely talks. It's so cool to see some amazingly designed Power Apps. So good to see apps that don't look like Power Apps as well. I always love that. And yeah, we'll be publishing this video on YouTube within 24 hours, and we've got all our links there. And we also have a feedback form, so we'd love feedback on the 2 sessions today, and also feedback to know what everyone would like to see in the future, because of course this user group is for everyone's benefit, and we get amazing speakers like Heather and JP and Stuart and Taylor in the future, and we'd like to know who we should reach out to. Of course, we're thinking about Tolu for the future. Hopefully he'll join us. But yeah, more speakers, more feedback, and yeah, it's brilliant. And that's it. Thank you so much for attending.